Hello everybody, my name is Jim Brittsan. I am an intern at Coral Restoration Foundation, and today I want to talk to you guys about what we're doing down here in the Florida Keys and all around the world. Just a little background information. I am from Delaware, Ohio. I graduated from Bowling Green State University with a degree in biology and a specialization in marine and aquatic science. And let's talk about some corals. So for 500 million years, these coral species have been one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in our planet. And actually, like to put that into perspective for some people, their very first forms have been around 7 times longer than dinosaurs would have been around. So I think dinosaurs went extinct about 65 and 75 million years ago. So that's much older than the dinosaurs. So that's cool to put it in perspective there. And since the 1970s, reefs have rapidly been degrading. They're one of the most threatened habitats on Earth, and specifically stony corals are starting to become more threatened, and even some species are looking to become endangered. So what are the services that coral reefs can do for us? Not only are they required for some people's livelihoods, the fishing industry, tourism, there's just so much that they can do, and it's hard for us to really put a number on it, but if someone kind of tried to quantify that, and it was estimated at $10 trillion as all of its total industry worth. So really important for us and other species all around the world. And we've lost 50% of the corals within the last 30 years. So they've been around for 500 million years, and within 30 years we've lost 50% of them. That's really alarming and scary to think about, and within the next 80 years they could become entirely extinct. So that's within my lifetime, within some people's kids' lifetimes, they're going to be gone, and that's not going to only affect corals, but that's going to affect humans and so many fish species, so many other species within the ocean, so scary. And the Florida Reef Tract is our natural wonder in the United States. It is the 3rd largest barrier reef, and the largest barrier reef is actually the Great Barrier Reef. So we want to protect this one because it's in our state, like our home country, but we want to protect them all specifically. And the Florida Reef Tract is 360 miles long, stretching from, so it starts up in Miami and it goes all the way down past Key West into the Dry Tortugas. The Florida Reef Tract, just talking about what it does for us down here in Florida. It protects the coastlines, so these corals are basically protecting our beaches from washing away. Our mangroves, they sort of, prevent waves, high wave energy, and minimize that damage to our beaches. It's a massive habitat for fish. The fishing industry, people can know where they can catch fish, and also the tourism industry. One funny thing we like to say down here is that there are more dive shops than gas stations, so that's pretty funny to think about what it does for us. And within the last 40 years, we've lost 97% of the once dominant elkhorn and staghorn species. These are some stony coral species, and there's many areas that only have 3% cover now, so we want to bring that back up and get the biodiversity going. And now what we've seen in the Florida Keys on the Florida Reef Tract is now being seen globally and in the Great Barrier Reef, which is the largest. So that's really depressing. But on a good note, CRF has kind of pioneered some of the ways that we can sort of restore coral, and are continuing to research new methods. And one of them is the coral trees, as you guys can see here. These are some of the methods we've designed, and they're starting to be used all around the world. So Carey's Fort Reef, let's get into where it is pretty much. This is a reef that was very popular in the 70s and 80s. Very good dive site. People wanted to go to see. You can see many corals. This is US 1 going down into the Keys. That's how I got down here. Ocean Reef Club, and I'm talking to you guys today here at the Exploration Center. So let's take basically a trip through time at Carrisford Reef. In 1975, you can see this reef is just booming. Hundreds of elkhorn corals everywhere, sergeant major fish. You can just imagine all the little crabs, crustaceans, things around, loving it. This is their home, a city for them, a great place to be. So much biodiversity. You can sort of see the clarity in the water. It looks great. So fast forward 10 years later, in 1985, you can see those corals are starting to break down, starting to get some algae growth growing on top of them. The fish are gone. The clarity's starting to go a little bit. Let's go to 2004. And now it looks just kind of like a scary movie almost to me. The clarity's gone. No fish. It just looks like rocks now, a rubble yard. And in 2014, it's a complete coral graveyard. There's no fish. I wouldn't want to be there if I was a fish. This little guy right here is probably saying, I'm getting the heck out of here. There's nothing for me to eat. I want to go find a new place to live. So what are some local stressors that could have caused this, specifically in the Keys? Direct human impact, so that's just uneducated divers, snorkelers. When I got certified to dive, I wasn't told don't break corals. Like, it's not something they say. But I was also in Ohio, so maybe it's different elsewhere. But you know, you're kicking corals and breaking them off, and that's hundreds, if not thousands, of years of growth, depending on the size of the coral, just gone like that. So other things like boat anchoring. Down here, we've had in one of our nursery a boat anchor just rip up 3 of our coral trees, completely gone. So be very careful with what you're doing there. The disappearance of herbivores was huge. So there was this urchin in the 1980s, I think it was 1983, that had a mass die out. Like 98% of the population of this diadema long-spined urchin died out. And that urchin was so important because it would basically graze all of the algae along the seafloor, and basically without them, they can't. The algae is just overgrowing or just a huge competitor for the corals, and especially their larvae whenever the corals are spawning. Another thing to add fuel on the fire for that is when people were moving down in the 70s and 80s, more people were, oh, Keys, great spot, of course, it's awesome. But the sewage treatment wasn't the best for that, so they were just kind of pumping all of our waste and pollution out into the ocean, and that was just eutrophication, meaning excess nutrients in the water, allowing that algae just to grow even more rampant. So without the urchins and us humans moving down here, it just started killing the corals. And a little smaller one, but still significant, is chemicals in sunscreen. So some people have literally seen like divers that we have, if they accidentally use chemicals of sunscreen like avobenzone, octinoxate, and oxybenzone. If they touch a coral with that, basically within an hour, they can see them just completely die. So that's crazy to think about, but it does happen. And on like a bigger note, like a global stressor, climate change, it is real. Ocean temperatures are warming, so we can't really ignore this anymore. It's happening, and greenhouse gases are building up, and basically the ocean is a giant sink for that, and basically corals are the forests of our ocean, and they're absorbing all of this excess carbon dioxide, and that's breaking down their calcium carbonate skeleton. So they can't take it, and they just start to sort of break down, disintegrate. And another thing, the warming waters actually causes the corals to bleach, and basically the coral is just starving to death slowly. So there's an algae that lives within the corals, and it's called zooxanthellae, and that zooxanthellae does not like the warmer temperatures, so it leaves that coral, leaving it stark white, and basically the coral is now just slowly starving to death. That algae can come back into the coral, but it's unlikely because it's warm. So these are some factors that basically humans have caused for our oceans and our environment, planetary ecology. Why should we care about coral reefs? So I always ask people what are their favorite fish. Some people are like dolphins, cowfish, sea turtles. You know, all of these species are affected by corals indirectly or directly, specifically. Corals only cover 0.2% of the seafloor, and they support 25% of marine animals. So that little amount supports that a quarter of the marine animals is crazy. So they're extremely important. That dolphin that knows where to get a snack at this coral reef when on its migratory path, if the coral reef is dead and gone, it can no longer go there and find that. So it's crazy to think how many things are affected, but it's happening. And we are definitely affected by the loss of corals as well. So let's look at a healthy coral reef and a degraded coral reef. In the healthy coral reef, you can see mangroves on the shoreline. This guy's fishing, he's gonna catch a lot of fish, it looks like. Divers, the tourism industry, divers wanna see all these corals, all the fish. And they also, like on this rock, you can see the waves are stopped there, and then here, without the corals, it basically goes all the way in, erodes all those mangroves so they can't hold root into the ground, and it starts to break down our buildings, and that costs a lot of money. Along with that, you're losing fish that want to go there to get food. The divers are gone because there's nothing to see, and this guy is now catching nothing. Looks like he's going to try and catch plankton or something very small with a big fishing net. Not worth it, not healthy, not good. So this is just a little sort of picture of showing what happens when we restore the coral reefs. When you restore them from a nursery, we take them, clip them off, outplant them. More fish have a habitat to live in. Divers want to go see those fish. The fishing industry is supported because they know where to catch fish. Our shorelines are protected from erosion from those waves. And then over a long period of time, basically, that will start to regulate the carbon dioxide levels again because they can take it in, but as a healthy amount and not kill them. And what is the Coral Restoration Foundation? So we are the world's largest nonprofit marine conservation organization working towards restoring corals both in Florida and globally. Three of like the main pillars that we focus on are restoration, putting the corals back out there, education, one of the most important parts, because if no one knows what we're doing and why we're doing it, it doesn't matter, it's not going to make a change, and the science. So we got to make sure we're monitoring our corals' health so we can report that to the public and to science, basically saying it's working, or yeah, it's we got to develop new monitoring techniques to better that. And it's not just us doing this, we need large-scale mass action, so not just CRF, other coral organizations, but we need the public to really understand what is going on with coral reefs around the world, and everyone take care with their daily actions and really think about conscientious decisions and make them. And these stony coral species are seen as threat, like all around the world, by multiple agencies. CITES, the Endangered Species Act, and the IUCN Red List of Endangered Species. Some of these have even listed them as endangered, critically endangered, and on the edge of extinction. These are some of the corals that we focus on. The top corals are star corals, so that is the mountainous star coral and lobe star coral are two of the species that we outplant. They're like the big boulder rocks, really important for those shorelines, protecting the wave energy. Staghorn coral is also very important, along with elkhorn coral. These are elkhorn was the one in the picture of Carey's Fort, really important, housing so many different species. But it's not just those like 4 corals that we outplant. We also have 11 corals in our nursery that we're growing to see what happens to them when we grow them and just monitor them. So how do we do it? What do we do when we outplant them? What does Coral Restoration Foundation do? When we first started, it's called propagation. So that basically means if I was a coral, you could cut my arm off and it would grow another gym. And you could continuously keep cutting Jim's arms off, so there's a big room of Jims. We took these wild clippings, we got a permit from the government, we were able to do that, and basically clip off a couple small clippings, grow them onto a tree, and then those would grow into bigger corals, and we would clip those corals off, but leaving that little bit so they can grow into other corals. So you can continuously do that over time, and now our nurseries are completely self-sustainable. So That's really important. We're no longer taking from the wild, but some of those coral like genotypes that we first took from the wild are no longer existing in the wild. So we have some of the only genotypes in our nursery around the world. And within our Tavernier nursery, we have a genetic bank, and that's really important to have such genetic diversity. There's over 322 genotypes across the 11 species. It's really important to have that because some people might say, oh, let's just build a super coral that's genetically resistant to warming weather, diseases, any sort of like thing that can harm them. They're just like invincible. That might be a good idea for maybe a year or two, but something's going to come along eventually that's going to kill them. Just like with humans, we're top of the food chain and everything. Coronavirus comes along, wipes out a bunch of people, and now we're all in our homes trying to segregate from that. So to put that into perspective, if I was a farmer and I had 2 crops of apples, A and B, 50 and 50, and then I had a buddy over here that had just 1 crop of like A, 100 apple trees, and a huge storm comes along, kills out all of crop A. His entire crop is gone while I still have half of my crop of B because it was more resistant to the colder weather or whatever happened to him. That's why it's so important to have the genetic diversity. So if something comes out and kills all these species, some of those corals are going to be resilient to that and still live. And this is basically a process of restoration. We clip them once they grow big enough. Basically, then take their clippings, epoxy them to the seafloor in like a hula hoop size ring, and then they'll eventually fuse together and form a happy little reef, and all these fish are swimming around. And this coral tree is coined and designed by CRF. It's basically known as one of the fastest ways to grow coral. Not only it's suspended in the water, so it's hammered into the sea, like the sand, with a duckbill. It's basically like a little metal anchor. And then we can tether that, so it's got water flow all around the corals, but it's also like predation. It's hard for things on the ground to crawl up it and eat it, like the corals or mess with them. So that's also another thing. And each tree can grow 60 corals. So I think it's like around, basically, in our one nursery, we have 500 trees, and that's over 30,000 corals just growing in one tree per year from that. So, and corals also grow like at least two times faster on these coral trees rather than just on a reef growing. So it's really cool to see that they've designed something that cool, and it's being so successful. So let's pick our favorite coral on here. I usually pick the airplane in the top left. And then let's fast forward 9 months later. Where's my airplane? Well, it's obviously up there somewhere, but it's so hard to find your favorite coral that was on there because they've grown into these basically basketball-sized corals. And these are now ready to be outplanted. So then we'll take those off, leaving a little bit for more to grow, and then we'll take those and outplant them. So this is one of the fastest ways to grow them around the world recognized. And it's not just that one tree, and it's not just a dozen trees, it's an entire coral forest underwater. So we have, like I was saying, there's 500 coral trees in our Tavernier nursery. You can fit 3 boats in this nursery, so we can have lots of people diving in there, cleaning the trees, collecting fragments to go out and grow. And it covers 1.5 acres, so that's larger than a football field. And it's not just this one nursery. There's 7 coral tree nurseries total, netting like a total of 45,000 corals per year. So that's awesome. We can outplant many corals from that. And let's talk about bringing it back, the nurseries. So we have 8 restoration sites from Key, Largo, all the way down to Marker 32 in Key West. We take these high-tech milk crates, very scientifically driven. We basically clip them off the trees, put them in these crates, and then we'll drive them all the way down to Key West and outplant them out there. We want to basically have these dividers to divide their genotypes, so there's specific differences in them. And at the reef sites, we try to outplant 10 corals at a time in like a hula hoop size area. So basically we just chisel away at the sea floor. You put a little ball of 2-part marine epoxy, you mix these two together, put a little Hershey kiss down, and then you'll like gently push on the coral, and then that grows, and if it's in a hula hoop size area, those can fuse together and become a thicket. We're starting to move on to outplanting 50 corals at once to promote that fusion and create a larger amount of area covered. And it works. So what we're doing is there's something called photomosaics. And photomosaics is basically just like a diver swims over one of our restoration sites with a GoPro jig on like PVC, 2 GoPros, taking time-lapse photos, thousands of photos, just slowly at a time, swimming back and forth over this reef. We put it into a program, and it stitches all those photos together and creates this nice reef image that we can then zoom in on slowly and monitor the health of our corals. So that's really new technology, and it's being successful so far. And it's actually, our corals have like a 77% survivor rate. More of the bolder corals, like the star coral and just the star coral, they have like a 98% survival rate. So it's different between the species, but it's really cool to see that we have a 77% survival rate. Another way to check that our science is doing well and our restoration is successful is we had a researcher come in and basically just check where wild colonies of staghorn were in comparison to where we're outplanting staghorn colonies. And she was saying that it was decreasing where there was wild colonies where we weren't outplanting, and where we were outplanting, the populations of staghorn were increasing. So this is a picture of a healthy staghorn thicket. This started out as just 10 individual outplants. Can't even see where we once put them down. They fused together into a thicket. You can see the biodiversity coming back, all these other gorgonians and sea fans growing around it. The fish are around there. It just looks healthy and what we want to see. Something that I would go dive and I'd pay money to go see and look at. And not only do we know that they're thriving through that they're growing into a thicket together, but they're spawning. And this is really important because that's creating new genotypes for these corals. And that's really uses a lot of energy. If I'm surviving, rather just trying to survive, I can also try and reproduce. That's going to use a lot of energy. So they're thriving definitely, and they're able to create new genotypes that are hopefully genetically resistant to new diseases and things. So you guys remember that Carey's Fort Reef, really depressing after 2014. Let's look at it after we've thrown some outplants on it. This is just after 1 year, we have this elkhorn coral growing up. Looks awesome. Another picture, that's even better. You can see how much coverage, new growth amongst the old mortality, showing that we can recover our ecosystem down here. Awesome to see. Slow process, but it's working. We're doing good. And since CRF, the fruition of it, and it first started, we've outplanted over 100,000 corals total. So that's awesome to see that. This is in 2017, and then just 2 years later in 2019, it is the same layout. You can see the topography of the land. It's awesome. It's doing well. So I want to show you guys a video about what CRF does, and we'll reconvene afterwards. Alrighty, so after that epic music and video that really got you guys feeling on your emotional appeal, let's talk about like choices that you can make no matter where you are. It does matter. Anybody can become an ocean steward. This is just making conscientious decisions about what you're doing through daily activities. Whether you're trying to limit your plastic usage, I know it's really hard in our culture. All shampoo bottles that I know of are plastic, many things. But something really important is just to go spread the word along. If no one knows, once again, no one knows what we're doing, it doesn't matter. Education is so important. Using reef-safe sunscreens, reducing your carbon footprint if you want to carpool to work or something, take a bus to work. It all makes a little difference. But most importantly, no matter like where you are, just choose something that really speaks to you. It's better if everyone in the world did one thing in comparison to a couple million people doing all of those perfectly. If everyone stopped using straws for one day, that'd be like, I don't even know, billions of straws not used. And remember that every single ecosystem is interconnected. So if you're going to dump something, I'm from Ohio, if I dump something in the river, it's either going to lead to a bigger river, eventually to our oceans, or to the Great Lakes. It all makes a difference. The water cycle, it's all connected. Make environmentally healthy decisions. And you can get involved. It's kind of hard in some areas that you are, but if you're ever on a vacation in the Keys or something, and you want to come down and do a dive program with us and actually be able to outplant corals and say maybe years from now you come back and say, hey, somewhere in this area I outplanted a bunch of these corals that are huge now. That'd be crazy to think about that. You could do a volunteer program with us, do the same thing, but it's a little more intense and a little more time involved. But also, if you want to monitor some health of corals, there's this app called OK Coral. You can basically go down. You could even snorkel and do this and just monitor the health of corals for us. And showing your support. We are a nonprofit, so every donation, no matter what size it is awesome, helps us out. It all goes back to our restoration efforts, but also our merchandise is pretty cool. So some of our shirts, I know, are literally made from like recycled ghost nets, and like every single product that we have, except for maybe like one or two, has a meaning. People make it in Hades, and those proceeds go back to the Haitians. So it's kind of a cool talking point. Oh, what's CRF? You can tell them what it is, but then you can say, yeah, this shirt was made out of like nets. Cool. And keeping in touch. If you're ever in the area, come by the Exploration Center. We'll give you a tour. You can sign up for our Coral Chronicles, basically letting you know what we're doing. There's many different types about our science, education, restoration. If you send along to your teachers or professors, I can write your emails down and put you in the Coral Chronicles, but also check our website out, and on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, you can see what we're doing and stay involved and in touch. Thank you guys so much for listening to me today and watching this. I really appreciate it, taking the time out of your day to do this. I think it's really important just to educate people, no matter where they are, on what we're doing and why it's so important.